Hello everyone. This video will show how to sketch the graph of y equals arctangent of x. Now we remember that this notation that we have right here is read as arctangent of x, or we can also read this as inverse tangent of x. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down here. Now, we remember that this notation is not equal to 1 over tangent. Because this notation that we have right here, 1 over tangent x is cotangent x. Now, let's dive into sketching the graph of y equals inverse tangent of x, or y equals arctangent of x. So the graph that we have right here is y equals tangent x. To get the inverse tangent of x, we're going to use this graph to sketch the inverse tangent of x. So what I would do right now is to trace this graph using a pencil. The inverse of every graph is actually symmetric with respect to the line of symmetry, y equals x. So I'm going to go ahead and fold this graph right here along the line of symmetry, y equals x. So what I would do next is to trace the graph from the back. So that when we open this graph, it is already reflected along the y equals x. So I'm going to go ahead and trace the reflected graph down here. If you notice, this green graph that we have right here is not a function because it fails the vertical line test, which means if I put a pencil right here, the graph is touching the pencil 3 times, 1, 2, 3. But we wanted the inverse to be a function. So mathematicians have agreed that this tangent graph should be restricted in a way that it's gonna become a function. And they have agreed that we take only this middle graph here to be the graph of the inverse tangent of x. Now looking at this graph is actually symmetric along this line up here. Looking at the tangent graph right here, this line is actually symmetric to this line right here along the y equals x. Now this curve goes all the way to, this is asymptotic to pi over 2. So it has to be less than pi over 2 going to positive infinity. And this one right here is asymptotic to negative pi over 2. And this goes all the way to negative infinity. So this tells us that this end right here is actually the opposite of this one. So you just have to flip it. So this one would be positive infinity all the way to less than pi over 2. So in this case right here, this one is actually our pi over 2, and this is our negative pi over 2. And this one that we have down here will have this coordinate. We call this as like a coordinate. So this is the inverse of this one. So we just have to flip this. So that would be negative infinity and then less than negative pi over 2. So then let's determine the domain and range for the graph of y equals inverse tangent of x, or y equals arctangent of x. So looking at this graph right here, again, we're looking for the red graph here. Our range for this graph would be the y values. So it's going to start from less than negative pi over 2, then all the way to less than positive pi over 2. Since this is asymptotic, this is not a bracket, but it's a parentheses. So negative pi over 2 and pi over 2 are not included as the range for the inverse tangent of x. On the other hand, the domain for this graph would be the x values. So it's going to start from negative infinity all the way to positive infinity. So writing the equation for the inverse tangent of x, We can therefore say that the values for the inverse tangent of x would range from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. Well, the domain for the graph or the x values would range from negative infinity to positive infinity. Now, looking at the x and y coordinate here, we remember that going up here, which is counterclockwise, is positive. Going down here is negative. So that means if we go up here, this is our pi over 2. Positive. Now going down here, this is negative pi over 2. Since arctangent of x is defined from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2, this tells us that this inverse tangent of x is defined only in the first and fourth quadrant, and it is not defined on the second and third quadrant. Now let's look at the graph of inverse tangent of x using Desmos. If you notice, the graph that we have on the paper pencil version matches up with the graph that we have on Desmos. So that is how we sketch the graph of inverse tangent of x or arctangent of x.